Hi, I'm Mike Whitey from IELTSanswers.com. Today I'm going to talk to you about strategies for the IELTS speaking test. In particular, I'm going to talk about how you can extend your speaking and also some tips for each part of the exam. First of all, let's just review the 4 grading criteria. I do cover these in more detail in another one of my videos. You can look for it under the channel IELTS Answers. But essentially what we have is 4 different grading criteria that are each worth the same amount. Each one's worth a quarter. So we've got fluency and coherence, which is really about the speed that you speak at and avoiding long pauses. We've got vocabulary. You want to show the examiner that you have higher level vocabulary and at the same time avoid errors with vocabulary or word endings. And then grammar. And here you want to show the examiner that you can use more complex sentence structures such as conditionals or relative clauses, and also avoid making grammatical mistakes. And then in the last part, pronunciation, that you have clear speech, you're easy to understand, and also that you highlight your key points using stress and intonation. Let's move on to some of the strategies then, and we can think about the grading when we're looking at those. First of all, extending what we want to say. So I've got a couple of suggestions how you can go beyond single word or single sentence answers. Let's look at a sample question. What kind of food do you like? So the strategy here is to come up with 3 parts or 3 kinds of food that we like. In this case, I've selected Italian food, Korean food, and Mexican food. And not only that, I'm going to give reasons for each one. And note how I've rephrased because. So we've got because here for the reason. Now it becomes as it's very. It's another way to add on the reason. And then a third way, and this is due to. The other word that I rephrase is like. I've still used it a couple of times, but I've also got I'm really keen on, and down here kind of partial to. So I'm rephrasing the word like so that I'm not using like in every sentence. Okay, so let's see how this answer might go then. So question, what kind of food do you like? Well, there are 3 kinds of food that I'm really keen on. The one I like best is Italian food because it's full of tomatoes and very nutritious. I also like to eat Korean food as it's very spicy and I enjoy spicy food. I'm also kind of partial to Mexican food, and this is due to the reason that it's also spicy, but not only that, it has a lot of cheese and I really love to eat cheese. Okay, so that's the first strategy. Divide into 3 parts. It could only be 2 would be plenty also. Then on to the next strategy. General to specific. So here let's look at the same question again. What kind of food do you like? And this time I'm going to go general to specific and then even give an example. So general is seafood, then more specific Japanese seafood, and then finally down to an example, sashimi, which is a kind of fresh sliced fish. Says here it's delicious. Actually, I don't like seafood and I don't like sashimi, and perhaps this is another strategy, something I'm going to mention a bit further on, is that really this isn't a language exam, so what kind of food do I like? Really I should think not of what food I like, but try and show the examiner that I have some less common vocabulary to do with food. So I've selected sashimi. Okay. And also note the use of for instance. It's a way to avoid repeating the word for example all the time. So let's see how this one goes. Question, what kind of food do you like? Well, I'd have to say that I'm a big fan of seafood. In particular, I really like to eat Japanese seafood because it's always so fresh. For instance, sashimi is delicious because the raw fish is so flavoursome. Okay, so that's strategy 2, to go from general to specific. Then let's look at some of the parts of the IELTS exam and how can we best deal with them. So in part 1 we should give about maybe 4 to 6 sentences would be great to the questions we get asked. So again, looking at this sample question, what kind of food do you like? We should avoid simple one-word answers. I once had a student that I asked this question and her answer was, oh, anything. This causes a bit of a problem in the exam because you're not really producing any language. It's difficult for the examiner to give you a good score for fluency because you're not producing a lot of language. There's not a lot of vocabulary. There's not a lot of grammar. There's even not a lot of pronunciation. So this answer would not be so good. That's why the 2 previous strategies about dividing into 3 or going from general to specific are useful. And then another point is to focus on the language. I was talking about this before with the sashimi, even I don't like it. So if, let's say we like pasta, if we give the answer pasta, it's not so great. It's not uncommon vocabulary. However, if we got more specific, what kind of pasta, we could perhaps talk about linguine with scallops and shallots. So linguine is a kind of finer noodle than a spaghetti, and scallops a type of seafood, and shallots it's a little bit like garlic. So really what we're trying to do is to show the examiner language. The real answers don't matter. In some cases we're making up stories. We're not really lying as such, we're just making up stories about what we might possibly like. We're trying to perform well in the language test. And then the other thing is just as we've already been covered, use those strategies of dividing your answer into 2 or 3 parts and going from general to specific and maybe even adding an example on. So I think if you do this in part 1 of the speaking test, you're likely to be successful. Then with part 2 you get given a topic card, something similar to this. You need to speak for 2 minutes about this topic. You have 1 minute to prepare your answer. The key point really is to use your 1 minute well, and part of using your 1 minute well is making a good plan so that you have enough things to talk about for the 2 minutes. So we can see the topic, describe a party that you enjoyed. Now it says here on the card you should include. It really should say you could include. You don't have to include any of these points. You don't have to include them all. Really the topic is about a party and we enjoyed it. If we wanted to, we could tell it like a story. What happened in the beginning? What happened later on in the party? What happened at the end of the party? Maybe the police came. I've been to some parties like that. And then what happened after the party? Especially if the police came. Maybe they took your best friend to jail. I haven't been to a party like that for a while, by the way. That's when I was younger. So let's have a look at these, how we might plan some of these points. But as I mentioned, we're not limited to sticking to these points. We could have other points as well. But if we do use those points, how could we develop them? Whose party? Rather than just saying the name of the person, we can include our relationship to them. In this case, cousin. Actually, I don't have a cousin Billy, but that's fine. Remember the strategy about making stuff up. Tall, slim, and a moustache. Moustache is this thing here. Have a little bit of hair on your lip. That's called a moustache. Maybe Billy doesn't have a moustache, but we want to show the examiner we know this word. And then why not cover his personality? Shy, but an excellent singer. And then where was the party held? Well, we could just say Billy's house, but how about we show the examiner a bit more? A swimming pool, a snooker table. So a snooker's a bit like pool. Even if it didn't have a snooker table, show the word snooker. And huge backyard with an enormous barbecue. So rather than saying big, we've got huge and enormous. Higher level language. Then, why was it fun? Delicious food. We've just been talking about food. You can recycle some of that vocabulary into here. You could talk about the sashimi and the linguine with what was it? Scallops and shallots. So any language that you've got related to food, you could now bring into this topic. Lively music and dancing, great people, deep and meaningful conversations. So the idea is, with our 1 minute, if we make a solid plan, we're going to be able to speak for the full 2 minutes. So normally I would say you need 3 main points and then give more details about those. In other words, we've got 3 points and we're going from general to specific. We're kind of combining those 2 skills that we learned earlier. Let's talk about some other key points for your 1 minute. First of all, you can think about the tense you will use to answer your question. We're talking about a party we went to. Most of the answer will be in the past tense because we've already been to the party. However, if we're describing Billy or describing his house, what he looks like or what the house looks like, we're going to be using present tense. We use present tense for facts and figures, facts and opinions. Billy has a moustache. It's a fact. He has a moustache. Or his house has a red roof. If we say the house had a red roof, past tense, that means now it's not red. It must have been repainted a different colour. Secondly, you can write down any high-level vocabulary for the answer. For instance, under food, you might be writing down the sashimi or something like that. Then third, you can think a little bit about what you might do if you run out of time. Worst case, you could always start talking about another party or comparing it to another party you went to. However, there should be plenty of things to say about the party. We could talk about some of the other people that went to the party. What was their opinion of the party? What happened after the party? Was there a big mess? Who cleaned it up? So really you should be able to find lots of things to talk about with any of the topics. They're normally fairly general and allow plenty of opportunity to talk at length. Then moving on to part 3. Part 3 involves the examiner asking you questions related to your topic in part 2. However, the emphasis shifts from you to people in general. You're often asked to give your opinion, make comparisons, and make predictions. For instance, we've been talking about a party. In part 3, you might be asked, what sort of reasons do people in your country have for holding parties? Or maybe more general about festivals. What sort of festivals are celebrated in your country? So the focus has shifted from you to people in general. So first strategy in part 3. Part 3 is a little bit different to part 1 and 2. In part 1 and 2, you can ask the examiner to repeat a question, or you can ask the meaning of a single word. However, in part 3, you can ask for a rephrase of the question. Now, you might do this for a couple of reasons. One reason is to check you correctly understand the question. The second reason, you can use it to buy time. You may well understand the question, but you ask for a rephrase in order to buy yourself some time to think about what you're going to say and also some of the language that you're going to use to answer it. So that's the first strategy, ask for a rephrase. Of course, you can't do that on every question, but I think doing it once or twice is not a bad thing. Also, it shows some confidence, that you have confidence to ask the examiner a question. And then how would we do that? Well, we could use a phrase like this. Are you asking me? So let's say the question is, are parties these days different from parties 10 years ago? Then we might say, are you asking me how parties have changed recently? Okay, so that helps to make sure we correctly understand the question. We can use it to buy time. In addition, it uses up some of the time. The speaking test lasts maximum of 14 minutes. If you're asking questions, if you're getting rephrases, that will use up some of the time. That could be a good thing. Another strategy is to buy time with redundant phrases. Redundant phrases means they're not really necessary. They're non-topic based. Politicians use these. When you ask politicians questions, are you going to lower taxes? You don't get a straight answer from them. Their mouths move, words come out, but they don't actually say anything. That's the strategy we're using here. So let's look at a couple of these. The first one, well, that's an interest. Let's have a question. Let's say the question is, do you think people celebrate more in your country these days? And let's say you don't really have an opinion, or you're not sure how to express your opinion. Here's what you can say. Well, that's an interesting question. I've never really thought about that before, but I guess I would have to say that I agree. So in this case, we've produced a couple of sentences. The second one using a conjunction, so it's a compound sentence. Really, the only language related to the topic is I agree. However, we've packaged it much better. We've used a long phrase to package our answer. This way we're going to score higher on fluency because we're producing more language. The vocabulary is better in here than just saying I agree. There's more grammar. We've got a conjunction here, and also allows you an opportunity to improve your score for pronunciation, especially if you've rehearsed some of these. If you can build up some of these phrases so they come out very naturally with stress in the right places, then you're going to increase your score for pronunciation as well. Let's look at another example, and you can listen to my stress and intonation, and maybe you can learn from that. So let's try the same question, and we're just going to agree again, but we're going to package it a little bit better. I'm not really sure about that. However, if you are asking me for my honest opinion, I would have to say that I agree. So again, the only real meaningful language is I agree. However, we've packaged it better. So I hope you found this video useful. If you have, I've got some other videos under the channel IELTS Answers. In addition, if you'd like more help with your speaking, you can go to my website. I've got my direct page to my speaking here. You're also welcome to contact me by email. You can see it down here, mike@IELTSanswers.com. Hope you found this video useful.